to be louder?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so Peter Kirby is the speaker today. He's a local guy from San Rafael. He's written 3 books. He's been on some pretty significant webcasts and shows with the Truther and Freedom communities. He's been on with James Corbett and Dr. Merrill Nance, and Nicole Shanahan, and Coast to Coast, and Steve Bannon, and Tucker Carlson. NaturalNews.com, Global Research, one of the first ones in the pool after 9/11. One of the great Truther and Freedom websites. So I'm not going to belabor this any further. Please welcome Mr. Peter Kirby.
Hi. Wow. Look at all these people here. Oh my goodness. When I was holding events and just organizing them myself, I was happy. I was lucky if my mom showed up. So I'm very, very thankful to see so many people here today. I appreciate you. So yeah, his introduction was pretty much who I am. The way I like to describe it is that I'm just a normal guy who was disgusted by chemtrails and just started fighting it the best way he could. And I battled my way up from the dark corners of the internet all the way up to Children's Health Defense, Skyhorse Publishing, and the Tucker Carlson Show. So, I thank God that I have a brain to, kind of suss these things out. One of the first things I did when I became of chemtrails was that I figured, we're here in California and the government does absolutely everything, so I figured that they were probably monitoring the air for substances that aren't supposed to be there. And lo and behold, they were. It's called the California Air Resources Board. As most of you know, their main job is to enforce the theory of man-made global warming. But they were monitoring the air for what they called toxins. And they said none of these things should be in the air at all. And they included in their toxins aluminum and barium. But then you go to another page on their website where you can generate charts of ambient aluminum, barium, and other substances in the atmosphere. And there they were, in the atmosphere at elevated levels and rising. They were rising from 1996, the time that domestic large-scale spraying operations began, and continuing to rise. They might have had, one down year in there between the both of them. But both aluminum and barium were rising from 1996 until 2002, when the CARB stopped sampling for it. So, I took screenshots of this. And there was actually another environmental group that was aware of the CARB data at the time. It hadn't been publicized until I took screenshots and did a story on it, but there was this other environmental group maybe you've heard of called Environmental Voices with Deborah Whitman. Never heard of them? Okay, anyway, they were pestering the CARB about this data and saying, hey, what's up with this? But the eventual upshot of it was that the CARB ended up saying, no, that was not the data that you saw. And they presented new data, which of course, showed that the problem was either totally gone or barely there. But that new data that they distributed, they only distributed to me and about 20 other people. Never posted it on their website. Never did anything else about it. You can't generate charts for ambient airborne toxins on the CARB website anymore. They took all that down. So they just went ahead and swept it under the rug, when what they should have been doing was ringing every alarm bell. I mean, their mission statement is to protect the air quality of California and, protect people's health and protect business operations that might be affected by whatever's in the air and all this, but they aren't doing any of that. When their mandate comes up for them to actually do something, well, they just run away. And so that's where it stayed. They just sent me some BS emails, gave me some BS story. But that's how I made my first bone in the new media. And from there, I did like a 2-year investigation. From there, I could have been like, hey, I'm an internet personality now. Like, oh, look, people are paying attention, and I'm just going to, talk about all this and that and the other thing. That's not what I did. I went back to the drawing board, and did a 2-year investigation into weather modification. You didn't hear from me for 2 years. I was actually a staff writer at Activist Post by that time, because the former editor of Activist Post had just picked me up because I was just posting things on forum websites and whatnot. But, I had my foot in the door. I could have, gone in, just saying, hey, look at me, look how great I am, as so many people in new media do, but that's not what I'm about. I've done so much work on it. You might think that that's what I'm about these days because, I'm kind of like flippant, and as I just said to Marcia earlier, I'm kind of a diva. But it's only because I've done the work, and because I'm provoking a response. I'm at the point now where I've done all the homework. All I want to do is provoke. You know what I mean? Now I'm like, oh, hey, look at me, like, come attack me, please. Like it's all going to backfire in your face, because that's what's been happening. Because I'm in this, with a good heart. And there's all these trolls, internet trolls, and always attacking your work, and the carbs doing whatever they do, and all this stuff. All the weapons formed against me are failing and blowing up in their face. And so I intend to keep that going, because the more they try to squash this issue, the more people get interested in it. And so the fruits of my labor over the last 17 years is this book. Chemtrails Exposed, a New Manhattan Project, brought to you by Skyhorse Publishing. And we should really thank Nicole Shanahan and her fiance, Jacob Stromwasser, because she was the one, she called me down for my first in-person interview on the day that Trump was inaugurated. So she has offices down there in Menlo Park on Sand Hill Road. And, she was the running mate for RFK. They were the Green Party?
No, he ran as an independent.
Okay.
American.
She was the running mate of RFK in the 2024 election. And, they eventually threw their support behind Trump. But so she's still tight with RFK and everything, and, RFK is working for Trump. So I find it very interesting that I got called down to Menlo Park on the day that Trump was inaugurated, January 20th of 2025. And then 1 year later, the anniversary, January 20th, my book comes out. And on the same day that my book comes out, James O'Keefe releases a report from Davos showing you that all the elites of the world are all talking about chemtrails and how they're monetizing the natural world. And, they got all kinds of spraying programs that they're so happy about and telling everybody about and everything. I mean, this, and then we got the state's bills going through the state houses, and you got trolls talking about how, the state bills are scams, they can't enforce all that. Well, let me ask you this. How do you know what to put in the federal bill? How do you know what to put in the federal bill? You know what to put in the federal bill because of the stuff that they're putting in the state bills. So, this is a ground-up process, a bottom-up process.
Are you talking about, like, some of the states that have banned it, supposedly banned it?
Yeah, there's been 3 states that have passed anti-geoengineering legislation. There are 36 other states with legislation in the works, and even a whole gaggle of states in the West, which is particularly significant because it's in the West that the traditional cloud seeding industry has operated mostly. Because the traditional cloud seeding industry, not what I call the New Manhattan Project, is geared towards mostly increasing precipitation, increasing rainfall, more rain, more water. That's what you need in the West. In the East, it's more of a problem of too much water, not too little usually. And so, the first anti-geoengineering bills, the first anti-weather modification bills passed in the East. There was Tennessee, Florida, and Louisiana, if I'm not mistaken. Louisiana's in the south, but it's still on the eastern half of the country pretty much, and they have a lot of water down there. But now we have these bills popping up in the West. And, it would be even more significant that we challenge the weather modification people in the West. Although, we need to make a differentiation here between the traditional cloud seeding industry and what I call the New Manhattan Project. The traditional cloud seeding industry has basically set the precedent for all this. They've kind of just, prepared the space. And now we're going into the New Manhattan Project, which is global, and they use different types of substances that they're spraying on us. Most typically it's this coal fly ash, which is a toxic waste byproduct of the coal-fired power plant industry. I have a whole chapter in my book called Coal Fly Ash, and it's based on the work of world-famous PhD scientists, as well as the sitting director of sitting director of the Monroe County, Florida Department of Health. They had 28 peer-reviewed journal articles that they wrote about this. But yeah, so you have the local stuff, the cloud seeding stuff is done on just a regional basis, and they're using silver iodide, and they aren't using electromagnetic energy. The thing that defines the New Manhattan Project is its use of electromagnetic energy, particularly, although they are using a different substance and it's on a global scale. But, so, you know, I came onto the scene, started my weather modification research. That went on for like 2 years. People didn't hear from me, but then the first paper I came out with, of course, had all this information that I dug out from all this stuff. I mean, you know, I've been saying that I read a stack of weather modification documents a yard high. It was more like 2 yards. I had access to all of the Northern California UC's book depositories. There's a certain book depository called the Northern Regional Library Facility in Richmond. Maybe you've heard of it. It's the book depository for all of the Northern California UCs. And if you pay $100, you have access to the NRLF as well as the libraries on the campus of UC Berkeley. So I took advantage of that quite a bit. I did upwards of 100 interlibrary loans. I read hundreds of books, made thousands of photocopies, cost me over $10,000, and took pretty much, I say my total experience is 17 years, but the core of the research, really the heavy lifting parts of it, was more like 10 years. Because of course, after the initial weather modification investigation, you know, that was really just what opened all the doors. That's really just showed me where to look. It did that, but it also, I got a lot of nuggets out of that. The nuggets were the use of electromagnetic energy to control the weather. Most of the traditional weather modification literature is geared towards the conventional cloud seeding industry, where they're just talking about, you know, silver iodide, and they get into all the scientific details of, you know, seeding clouds with silver iodide. But if you read everything closely, you'll find instances of the use of electromagnetic energy and atmospheric electricity in weather modification programs. So I pulled all of those out and compiled that. This is what I've been doing. I've been pulling nuggets out of all the things that I look at, compiling all these things, and then putting it into a form that makes sense. If you've read anti-geoengineering books, most of them are a lot of rhetoric and a little bit of evidence. My book is the complete opposite. It's almost entirely evidence with a little bit of rhetoric. I just stitched together a narrative using all this evidence that I've compiled. And so, you know, I'm happy to present this book to you and to the world through Skyhorse, because if you read this book, you will have absolute clarity as to what's going on here. There's been a lot of confusion in this space, particularly conflating the conventional cloud seeding industry with what I call the New Manhattan Project. But I'm hoping that we can put that to bed. Dane is working tirelessly to get that done as well. But you know, we need to say, okay, these are two separate things, and they don't overlap, as far as I can tell. They
also don't look the same, do they?
They do completely different things.
I don't mean what they do. They don't look the same in the sky.
Right. I mean, if you're spraying silver iodide, it's not even like you're really spraying it. What they do is they attach these flares to the wings, and they light the flare, so it's like you got a bunch of road flares, and only usually one of them is going at any one given time. And you know, you don't see big gigantic lines coming out of a plane that's just has a silver iodide flare. It's a lot less stuff. It's not good for us. It's toxic, don't get me wrong. And you know, I don't think it should be going on. But it's not like you see a plane that's dispersing silver iodide, leaving a line, you know, big, gigantic, fat line that goes from horizon to horizon. That's the New Manhattan Project. They're payload spraying. We're talking about tens of thousands of megatons of material dumped on us every single year. Toxic waste is what it is, as I mentioned. So how much time have I taken up already?
Not very much, but I'm having a little bit of problem hearing you.
Really?
Can anyone else?
I can hear okay.
You can hear okay?
Yeah.
sound is kind of distorted.
Sound is distorted a little bit.
I can get my thing, you can get a little thing going.
Should we do that?
But, no, we're not, we're going with what we got right now.
Okay, well, like, maybe a little bit closer to your mic and a little slower.
Well, okay, I'll be louder. I mean, I have it set up so that this type of level of volume is gonna work for the production and everything, but.
Okay. You do it.
Yeah, please, someone ask a question, because I'm actually just like wondering where I should go with this now.
Just so people can maybe have a visual reference, am I wrong in thinking that cloud seeding happens at a lower altitude than
The traditional cloud seeding industry, yes.
happens low, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, the planes that they use can't even get that high.
Right. That's what-
You know, they're generally propeller aircraft, not even jet aircraft.
So everything we're talking about is the chemtrails.
Yeah, and the conventional cloud seeding industry, they also use ground-based generators, where you have something generating silver iodide that's just on a platform, maybe 10 or 15 feet off the ground, and it generates silver iodide, and it uses the prevailing winds to blow the silver iodide particles up the face of a mountain and then up over the top and create more precipitation and have the water go into a reservoir that's held up by a dam that produces hydroelectric power. So if you can produce more water behind the dam, then you're going to have more hydroelectric power. The PG&E and Southern California Edison have done a ton of studies on this, cost-benefit analyses, and it makes nothing but sense for them to do that, you know, especially from a ground-based generator, which is what they use. It's very cheap. All you need is a little piece of land and you build a little structure. It's, you know, maybe a little taller than this room, and with a silver iodide generator on there, and you know, you're making, like, I've seen studies where they say it's 20 to 1. Because for every dollar they spend, they're getting $20 back. Yeah, cost benefit ratios on these things. Yes.
Okay, ask questions.
Oh yeah. Why don't we just start asking questions? Because I think I've laid the groundwork pretty good for what my deal is.
So, I know something about this, not a lot, my husband knows a lot more, but I've been curious about all the legalities of it. So with the traditional cloud seeding, can they just do that without permits? Are permits necessary, and how can the government do all this with or without permits, or?
For the traditional cloud seeding industry, it's regulation light, and that's an understatement. You know, so you could probably print up a form on your printer and, you know, send it into them, you know, snail mail, and just figure that you're covered for pretty much anything that you might want to spray out of a plane. That's pretty much my take on it. But silver iodide, definitely, the enforcement on it is very lax, and apparently it's very easy to just fill out some form and pay. Maybe you pay like $25 or something like that, you know, to get it all proper.
Who do you send that form to? What agency?
I'm not sure. It varies by state, but it is legal at this time in all of the states, unless they've passed bills recently that have deemed it illegal. It became legal after World War II, when 3 scientists from General Electric Labs, Irving Langmuir, Vincent Schaefer, and Bernard Vonnegut, they dumped dry ice out of a plane into a cumulus cloud and made it rain. This was the story that you saw in the press. And you know, it was a big story. It was the public's consciousness, the narrative was diverted to that story for, you know, a week, as it usually goes. But then a couple of weeks after the public's consciousness was diverted away from the dry ice story, well, then the 3 scientists from General Electric, they started dumping everything into the clouds. They started dumping silver iodide, lead iodide. I have a whole list of chemicals that you know, have been used in weather modification since the exploits of the 3G scientists in late 1946 and early 1947. So what they did was they pulled a bait and switch. They said, oh, we're just dumping dry ice. Look at it. Isn't it wonderful? They made it rain with dry ice, which is fine because dry ice is innocuous in the environment, right? It's actually frozen carbon dioxide, but it's completely innocuous. It's like they were dumping water out of a plane, basically. So that's like nothing. But silver iodide, as we have now come to know, is toxic. In fact, I would call it highly toxic. And there was nothing in the historical weather modification literature about the toxicology of silver iodide, the ecological toxicology of it. Nothing in the historical weather modification literature until 1969. So that's a little over 20 years. And you can, like I've been saying, you could read a stack of weather modification documents a yard high and never see anything about the toxic effects of silver iodide. But there was this one 1969 Bureau of Reclamation report, and in the report, they note this. In the report, they say, to this day, there have been no studies pertaining to the toxic environmental effects of silver iodide. And then they go on to show the toxic effects of silver iodide in the environment. They say their study found it was toxic to fish. They were looking at sticklebacks. And they found it was even more toxic to microorganisms, the building blocks of life. If you ask the National Weather Modification Industry Association, they say don't worry about it. There's no problem. Like, this is innocuous, or it's just like a tiny little bit of stuff. You know what? That accumulates, though. It accumulates everywhere. It doesn't just go away, especially if you're using a ground-based generator. Because, you fire that thing up, it's dispersing right there in that area all the time, and it's been doing so for 80 years. So, and then wherever the wind's blowing it, I'm sure that whole area is devastated. So, yeah, this is the kind of games that they play. This is the kind of precedent that has been set for the New Manhattan Project.
Can you describe what coal fly ash is and what's in it, and what are the properties of it that cause it to persist for so long and spread out?
Yeah, the coal fly ash. This was, it's a whole chapter in my book. It's the work of a world-famous PhD by the name of Marvin Herndon, as well as at the time when the papers came out, a sitting director of the Monroe County, Florida Department of Health, a guy by the name of Mark Whiteside. I've interviewed both of them. I did a show on my Rumble channel. It's called The Abstract, and I did an interview with both of them at the same time. They have 28 peer-reviewed journal articles published in different journals. And, they found the chemical signature of coal fly ash in all of the environmental samples that they had. And so, we know what the substance is that they're spraying us with, and this is a very important piece to the puzzle. And we also know what the environmental effects of coal fly ash are, because there's been lots of environmental studies on the environmental impacts of coal fly ash, because this stuff used to billow out of coal-fired power plants until they put machines on the coal-fired power plants that intercepted all this stuff. But, before the 1976 Clean Air Act that, finally put an end to all of it, all of, a lot of pollutants coming out of industrial factories, there was a whole evolution starting back in the early 1900s of people saying, hey, this crap from your industrial plant is fouling my land, it's creating clouds and it's raining out and it's just destroying everything, so there were a lot of concerned people, and it was really prompted by a lot of class action lawsuits. There's just that forced the industrial companies to put these machines on their factories that intercepted not only coal fly ash, which is probably the main offender, but any kind of substance that's going to be toxic and foul the surrounding environment. And these machines are known as electrostatic precipitators, otherwise known as scrubbers. And there was this one company called Dresser Industries. It's now a part of Halliburton. So you're already thinking Bush, right? Well, the Bush family personally owned shares of Dresser Industries. We had Bush Sr. personally owned shares of Dresser Industries, the company that basically ran all of the coal fly ash sequestration for decades, and to this day they still do as a part of Halliburton. And I have, the Bush family is heavily implicated in my book. I have a section in the book, a part of the chapter called "The Power Behind the Chemtrails" is a compilation of the Bush family and their apparent involvement here. I did a video and an article that's in my Rumble stack as well, called "Chemtrails: A Bush Family Business?" ? Got to have the question mark.
So what's in coal?
But I got to go to other people.
So it seems like the thesis of this book is the New Manhattan Project. I'm wondering how you came up with that, and what does it mean? What is the distinction of this type of modification versus any other?
Well, I think I went over what differentiates the New Manhattan Project from the traditional cloud seeding industry. But, the reason why I call it a New Manhattan Project There's a lot of reasons why, and it's difficult for me to remember all the reasons. There's so many, but you go through the book and it just pops up time and time again. But you can start with Glenn Seaborg, who was the primary advocate for something called planetary engineering right after World War II, which of course is synonymous with today's geoengineering, which is predominantly an area of study devoted to spraying things from planes in order to save us from global warming. It's known that branch of geoengineering is actually known as SRM geoengineering, solar radiation management geoengineering. And that whole thing is totally flawed, because if you have any type of cloudiness, this is basic atmospheric physics. If you have any type of cloudiness, that holds in heat. That holds heat in, because the heat comes off of the earth and it gets trapped from the cloudiness. So their whole thesis is wrong. But okay, so we had Glenn Seaborg right after World War II, and then you have a whole bunch of former Manhattan Project scientists getting involved in weather modification and the atmospheric sciences after World War II, most notably the two most famous Manhattan Project scientists, John von Neumann and Edward Teller. You have the progression of the original Manhattan Project became something called the Atomic Energy Commission. Everybody's heard of this. And the Atomic Energy Commission was involved in quite a few things pertinent to the new Manhattan Project. Specifically, they developed atmospheric tracers that they sprayed from aircraft in order to track and trace air movements. The Atomic Energy Commission did. And then they did some other things that are kind of slipping my mind, but the Atomic Energy Commission became today's Department of Energy. So today's Department of Energy is the organization that has inherited everything. There's the line, the progression, the lineage from the original Manhattan Project to today's Department of Energy. And the Department of Energy has published SRM geoengineering studies. The Department of Energy worked with Lawrence Livermore National Labs to produce the largest atmospheric modeling program to date. Program for, I shouldn't even try to remember the whole name of the thing, but it was a huge effort in atmospheric modeling that took place at Lawrence Livermore National Labs, which in Lawrence Livermore National Labs I implicate in the book heavily as well. I think that's probably the place where you're going to find a command center, most probably. The most probable place to have some type of command center would be Lawrence Livermore National Labs. It goes on and on. There's more things. I did it just in an interview with Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, and she asked me that question too. I was waiting for somebody to ask me that question, because especially on a Zoom call, I can do it because I have my notes. You know what I mean? So on the Tenpenny thing that's supposed to come out next week, I was able to rattle off like all the reasons why, and I was able to rattle off all these other things like all these different Manhattan Project scientists and famous scientists making comparisons between the force of atomic bombs and weather systems. And then there's a whole bunch of people, famous, important people, calling for a new Manhattan Project and weather control and this kind of stuff. So all the details that are in my book, and I encourage you to watch the Tenpenny show. It's supposed to come out. What?
The Tenpenny interview? No,
she has her own thing. She invited me on the show, and I did the interview the other day, and she said it's going to be out next week. She's on a bunch of different platforms. I don't think she's on YouTube, but yeah, she's one of those people that actually asks the right questions. So thank you. Yes.
A couple of questions actually. First, how successful have those three states been in getting rid of this stuff in their particular states?
It's not really their thing to do that. Like I said, we're gathering input. I don't think that anybody directly involved with these bills is under the illusion that the states are going to enforce these things. I think that if someone is out there saying, oh look, the whole thing's a scam because the states can't enforce it, I start wondering about that person. Like, do they understand what a bottom-up political grassroots movement looks like? Because that's how this works. It goes from the grassroots to the state level and then up to the feds. So, it's not really time for that yet. That's why the federal bills are so important. And A new federal bill has been introduced. I just heard about it less than a week ago. So now there's 2 federal bills. There's the one that you might know about. Marjorie Taylor Greene introduced it last year in July, I think it was. But now we have this other guy, Kevin Stube, I think is his name. I don't know what state he's from, but it's been released. It has an HR number, and I can't remember it off the top of my head. But we do have 2 federal bills now. So I guess at some point we're probably looking at those things merging, and that's what our focus. I mean, our government in California probably isn't going to do anything about that because all these states bills, it's all been Republicans. I don't know of a single Democrat that has sponsored any of these states bills. And California is just completely dominated by Democrats. So I don't think California is going to get any type of that action. So I mean, our focus really should be on the federal bills.
Right. One more question.
Well, okay.
This seems like a very large scale operation. I've always wondered about meteorologists. They must know about this.
Oh yeah. A lot of people know.
So when they say, oh, it's going to be partly cloudy on Tuesday, they're saying, well, that's the day they're going to spray.
It's not the only thing the mainstream media is lying about. I mean, just when you thought they were telling the truth about sports and weather, you know what I mean? But no, yeah, they know. I mean, we've had different meteorologists come forward and say, yeah, we know this is going on. We've had a lot of retired pilots come forward and say, yeah, this is going on. I mean, these are the type of people that we need to start pressuring. Pilots and weather people, because you're just letting the world burn just so you can have your little paycheck and, your little at least copper parachute or whatever you got going on. And, it's just, it's totally abhorrent to me, I'm not someone who's going to just sit around and just watch everything be destroyed and, be the what is it they call it, on your feet in hell or on your knees in heaven. I mean, I don't know if I'm using that properly, but I don't want to be in a world where, or I can't be happy in a world that's just dying and everybody's dying. And I mean, they're doing the COVID shot thing to us too, and it's just like then they're doing the fluoride and they're doing the GMOs and they're doing this and that and the other. But I mean, chemtrails is the thing that you cannot avoid. We could all avoid the COVID shots, right? We could all say we could all say no if we really wanted to, if we really tried hard enough, as many of us did. But the chemtrail thing is, and you can not drink fluoridated water, but you take showers in it. And so that's a little bit difficult to avoid. But I mean, the chemtrail thing is totally unavoidable, and that's why it was so totally unacceptable to me, and why I've done what I've done. Oh wait, could I hear from the guy in the back there, please?
Yes. Back when PG&E was shoving smart meters down our throats, people would approach me and I would put together a letter to PG&E saying, put that here, and then we would invoke 6 different treaties, all the way from Geneva Convention to the present day, saying that you can't use biological weapons or any other weapons against civilian populations. Stop them cold. You ever thought about approaching it in that manner?
Well, could you
As a remedy, as a solution to stop them from doing it, say, here's the treaties, here's the international law saying you can't do that.
Oh, I mean, these people are.
The sheriff has jurisdiction over the skies.
No, I mean, laws? What laws? These people don't pay attention to laws. People who are doing this are a supranational group. They don't care about nations. They don't care about laws. They're just going ahead and doing it. I mean, it's known as the New World Order. And they in fact, it's beyond not caring about America. It's more like, they're actively trying to destroy America, first and foremost. You're right here, please.
So a question was asked before about licensing for the silver operation.
Yeah.
But what I don't understand is who's paying for those millions of tons of stuff that's coming out of those airplanes, and what's the profit motive there? How are they getting return on their investment?
Yeah, well, there's more involved here than profit motives. I do have a whole chapter in my book devoted to motives and, financial markets that rise and fall with the weather. There's weather and war. There's, agriculture. There's water that cities need and all this kind of stuff. But You know what's really come to mind recently as to why they're doing this and why they won't give it up is because it destroys everything.
Because what?
Because it destroys everything.
Well, it destroys.
Wait, let me finish. Okay, hold on a second. They want the natural world destroyed
Yeah.
in order to bring in their synthetic world. You see them building the synthetic world. They've been telling you about it time and time again, the genetic modification of seeds and plants, the genetic modification of humans. What they're doing and why it was in Davos and why it was the talk of Davos this year, because they're finally rolling it out. Last year, remember that Air Force report, Owning the Weather in 2025? Well, they wanted the weather owned by 2025 because in 2026 they're monetizing the natural world with these programs.
Yeah, that's scary.
Because they can only get patents on it if it's synthetic.
There's tons of patents, no shortage of patents on that's why they put the patents out there, because they know at some point they're monetizing it. They want to be there and be on that gravy train. Or else they wouldn't want that information out there. They wouldn't want to be associated with this mad science, that causes people like us to get together and, say, hey, this whole system is corrupt. You right there, please.
Yeah, what are you seeing out there? Are you noticing that there's more and more awareness about this whole geoengineering, climate change, all the mystery fires that seem to be surgically placed, all the land grabs, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, yeah, we all see it. Just with the rise of the new media, you see people understanding these things and knowing more about these things.
I hear so much denial. People are really swallowing up what they're fed in the media.
There's large portions of the population that will never come to grips with this.
Right.
There's lots. You look back through history, there's all kinds of different groups of people that have, believed in things that were false, and of course they were relegated to what we call the dustbin of history. These are irrelevant people in the large scheme of things. They're the lowest common denominators, and maybe at some point they'll get religion and see what's happening here, but it's we're not there yet, so that's why we keep on flogging everything. Well, who hasn't asked a question yet? You haven't asked a question.
Yeah, regarding the bills and the laws to ban geoengineering in different states, I understand that those bills and those laws are actually there because they recognize that geoengineering is being very damaging to the state. The argument is that the federal government has jurisdiction over the atmosphere above 1,000 feet or something like that. So whatever happens at that level is in the hands of the federal government.
In the hands of who?
Huh?
In the hands of who?
The federal government.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the federal government has jurisdiction over the atmosphere above 1,000 feet or whatever.
2 feet.
You may know about it better. Now, that's all fine as long as the activities in that atmosphere are not damaging to the state. So what I'm not seeing in the bills is that they actually have the right to protect themselves from attacks from domestic and international enemies. So in this case, these operations are acting as really as an act of war.
Yeah.
So why the states are not aware that they actually have the right, and so therefore they could actually stop these operations. All the electromagnetic frequencies that are being used on their state, and also for all the spraying, as long as they know that this is a hazard and attack to the state.
Okay, Marcia, please let me know when I need to stop talking. But,
About 5 more minutes.
okay, so you're saying we're under attack. This is basically, you know, biological and geophysical warfare being used against us. So why don't the states do anything? Well, first of all, I don't think the states really have the facilities to do anything. It would be the feds. But, you know, there's lots of things that could be done. And just stuff isn't happening. You know, I'm recommending a federal grand jury investigate this with subpoena power. I mean, if you want to know who to subpoena, I'm your guy. I got all kinds of stuff. I mean, the book.
We wanna know, actually.
The book has, okay, well, off the top of my head, you subpoena Boeing, you subpoena Halliburton, you subpoena this company called Harris, you subpoena the Micro Corporation. I mean, you subpoena the Department of Defense. See, but then we're going to run into these problems if such a grand jury is formed. You're going to run into these problems where they say, that's a matter of national security, that's classified, you can't know about that. So I don't know how we would work through that.
What airfields get used?
There's other people that have questions.
We don't follow directions, actually.
He's-
Right. I'm
He is.
directing.
Thank you. Did anyone test the air when we had the very strange abnormal fog a few weeks ago? I want to know what was in that.
I haven't heard. I haven't heard. You know, they're hitting us with so much stuff all the time that it's really hard to keep track of all this. You know, I do believe Dane Wigington when he says that they're hitting us with all these different things, and you know, this is what we're seeing in the test results. What I just generally say is that they've been hitting us with whatever they want, whenever they want, since World War II, and this is documented mostly in a couple of books called Clouds of Secrecy by Leonard A. Cole and In the Name of Science by Andrew Golachek. If you read those two books, you'll see that we have documented hundreds of examples of the government spraying us without our knowledge with biologicals and chemical weapons. So, I mean, that's just what we know of. You know, that's what we don't know of. It's probably about 10 times that.
Yeah, there was pneumonia going on in Marin in the previous few months, which I've never had pneumonia in my life. I had it at the end of October, so it was pretty weird. And I ran into other people with that.
They're just hitting us. They're just doing it. And, you know, also my science advisor says that we should also take into account that a lot of the, bacteria, mostly the fungus, the fungi, might be the result of just poor tank maintenance. You know, the tank where they keep the chemtrail spray, they just don't clean it, and you know, stuff starts growing in there, and that might be the fungi that we're seeing
Is there
a
any way
lot.
we can test the air ourselves? How would we do that?
Test the air yourself.
Yeah, take air samples.
Well, I think it's probably pretty complicated, and that's why I've only heard of states doing it and professional scientists, such as those that were working at the California Air Resources Board. But sampling, it's more like what you want to do is collect rainwater. That's more simple. And, you know, there's not supposed to be anything in that rainwater. You know, but it's not like you'd be the first person to do that. I mean, we have hundreds of rainwater samples available online as PDFs. It's always, the more the merrier. It's always welcome. But I think we've pretty well established, you know, the environmental samples aspect of all this. Yes, sir, there?
Yeah, to be clear, make sure I understand this correctly. From all your studies, you feel they're directly trying to either kill us or harm our children or just basically ruin everything so that the new order can take over? Is that the gist?
You know, that's my most recent thinking on it. You know, that's not in the book, but I've been having a lot of epiphanies since I've kind of put this whole thing to bed, you know what I mean? I've been able to take a step back from it and try to figure on, you know, who's doing it. Another epiphany that I've had recently is that I think big tech is the head of the snake. And I think that this whole thing is being run by a quantum computer, artificial intelligence. It's way too technical, way too complex for even, you know, a whole group of guys to be doing, you know, making modifications to it in real time. You probably have guys who tell the AI that they want certain things done, and then the AI gets it done. But, you know, I think they have highly functioning quantum computers, which is something that they've been hiding from us. And I think that they have a centralized quantum computer, artificial intelligence that is running the New Manhattan Project and everything else. And I think that all the big heads of big tech, I think they all know about it. I mean, I think Musk probably knows about it, Larry Ellison probably knows about it, Peter Thiel, guys like that. They probably all know about it. This is probably where all this garbage that's constantly being shoveled at us is coming from. You know, they need to get the ideas. They ask the AI, you know, what do we do now? And the AI says, oh, create this story, you know, this BS about this or this BS about that. You know, like, because you can ask the AI, we've all had experience with AI now, you can ask it what to do. And this all goes back to John von Neumann with game theory and artificial intelligence, you know, tic-tac-toe, like in the movie War Games. One side does this, and then the other side says, what do we do now? And then the AI tells them, and they do something. The other side says, oh, they just did this. Tell the AI, you know, what do we do now? And then they do something, and, you know, it goes back and forth like this. And I think that there's a malevolent quantum computer AI that's running the New Manhattan Project and everything else that it can. And I think there's actually a benevolent AI system that's currently in operation at this time, and we're in the middle of World War III, and it's largely a confrontation between these two AIs, and it's been going on for some time. This is, you know, these are epiphanies that I've been having. This is speculation. The book is like hardcore documentation, like court admissible evidence from beginning to end, pretty much. But, you know, I've been able to kind of surmise what the larger questions and larger answers are from all this. Do we have any more time?
We're just about out for this segment, so we're going to bring Dr. Perot in a second, but I did want to, and then Peter will be around when this is over, ask some questions. And then he's got a book for sale, obviously. He's got it with him. He's got copies of the book with him. You have a website, yeah?
PeterAKirby.com.
And he also has that available as an audio book. And are you going to be able to take just donations if people aren't getting the book?
Well, something that we haven't said so far, Marcia is out $400 for renting this room today.
So, and then we have a little box in the back, little wooden box.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to leave a little
Yeah, it would be greatly appreciated, because they raised the prices on her all of a sudden. She thought she was going to get the room for like $25, but they raised the price.
$1 million insurance coverage.
She had to get the insurance coverage. They stuck her with a cleaning fee.
Plus a $50 cleaning. So all
We're not even leaving a mess.
It's all kind of new, but anyway, I sprung for it, but if you want to help, welcome to Marin County.
I also wanted to say, sorry?
Is this video going to be available?
Yeah, I'm looking to post it on my social media. I'm figuring to post it on probably on YouTube and on Twitter. I'm on X. I'm Peter A. Kirby on X, and then on YouTube I'm Peter A. Kirby as well. And then I might post it on Truth Social. On Truth Social I'm The Abstract. I hide on Truth Social.
Well, you send it to me and I'll send it out to everybody who's.
Yeah, you too. I want to get you a good copy so you can send it to whoever wants it as well.
Yeah.
Let's give Mr. Kirby a hand. I just want to make one real quick comment in case I'm going to be